Addie, do you know what paper is made out of?
No.
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
What do you think it's made out of?
Paper.
You think paper is made out of paper?
Yep.
How would we make paper?
I don't know.
Have we ever read a book about it?
Yep.
What was it called?
Paper chase.
Paper Chase, exactly. Who is in Paper Chase? What are the characters' names?
James. It's reading now.
Welcome to Toddling the Stacks, a human-produced children's literature podcast where we delve the archive for forgotten treasures to help you make sense of this impossibly large body of work and, hopefully, find some new favorites for your kid. I'm your host, Sean, an Ivy League English PhD with a toddler girl called Adalyn, who is somehow even more critical of books than I am. Today, we'll be looking at Julia Donaldson's 2025 book, Paper Chase, a picture book suggested for readers aged 4 to 8. It seems strange to be focusing on so contemporaneous a book by so popular an author, but I have reasons. First, Donaldson's US Wikipedia page doesn't even mention the book, despite listing text published after it. Second, Amazon's US site has just 2 reviews. One, a merciless pan that ends with, "I'm confused and a little disturbed, and I feel like someone should check on the author." Professional reviews, by comparison, seem positive enough, but the traction appears to be lacking. Lastly, though, Paper Chase is a book about making paper, and friends, if I thought that I could pitch a subscribers-only paper-making podcast to you, that is where we would be. The environmental cost of paper production methods of the mid-19th century were at the core of my dissertation. But, alas, that is not why we're here. Instead, we'll talk about this charming, well-considered bit of children's literature. Paper Chase is the story of 2 youths, Ginger and James, who have a kind of meet-cute one day in the woods where James is reading a book and Ginger is playing with a paper airplane. They merrily pass the day together before being recalled by their parents, but such was their fondness for one another that they find themselves returning to the same spot time and again, hoping to relive the moment. It's on such a trip that Ginger spies a group of workmen felling the forest's largest tree. Here the tale cuts to a kind of B story, where we see the afterlife of this once proud spruce. It is carried to a paper factory, where it is mechanically pulped and formed into a slurry, which is then sieved along a rolling belt and flattened into paper. From there, we see the paper used in all the multifaceted ways in which paper is used, as toilet tissue, shopping bags, cereal boxes, and importantly for us, a book that Ginger receives, and the writing paper with which James will form his own paper airplane, from a letter he has written to his friend. So equipped with the very instruments that brought them together in the first place, it can only be a matter of time before the pair find one another again, blissfully unaware of the network of paper that has always bound them together, happy only to see one another and become friends anew. I want to be clear that there's not a touch of romance suggested here. Rather, Ginger and James enjoy the kind of wholesome friendship for which I imagine we all long. The radical alterity of someone who accepts you and sees you unflinchingly. It also captures with empathy and tenderness the sometimes strange and transitory nature of childhood friendships, forged quickly and quickly discarded. The sadness that illustrator Victoria Sandøy captures in James's and Ginger's eyes is evocative, compelling, but not hyperbolic. In their wrestling with an emotion too large, too adult for them, I see in Ginger and James's faces the same frustration any of us might experience at trying to find the right word that sits, elusively, just beyond the tip of our tongues. Mostly, though, I want to talk about paper, and yes, I know I said that's not why we're here, but while I teach my students ad nauseum about the importance of knowing your audience, it's just a fact that I don't know what you know about paper. It may be that Sandøy's illustrations represent a kind of epiphany for you. Perhaps you didn't know that paper was made from trees at all, or perhaps you make paper for a living and know much more about it than I do. Most folks, though, I imagine, haven't thought much about it at all, especially in this advanced age of digital media. But not thinking about paper, it seems, is a relatively modern invention. In the past, when paper was more scarce and far more expensive, folks thought about it a lot. The letter which Mr. Darcy writes Elizabeth is perhaps extravagant in taking up 2 pages, a bit more so in consuming a third for an envelope which itself is still written over. But the true meaning of his immense wealth is only observed when one realizes that he's placed the lot of this in still a 4th sheet, presumably blank, the letter that Elizabeth opens to find the rest. For those watching on your screen, you're seeing what this looks like in practice. This is a letter from none other than William Wordsworth to Henry Reed, professor of literature at the University of Pennsylvania. A nation's poet laureate sending letters across the ocean still had the thrift not to enclose them in an unwritten-upon sheet. Some media theorists and historians of the book, like Jonathan Senshin and Robert Darnton, have studied that thinking about paper, particularly the role it had in developing communities and discourse networks. You see, it wasn't until the end of the 19th century that paper came to be made from trees generally. For nearly 800 years before that, it was made from cotton and linen rags. That is, from the very clothes off our backs. And there's a certain intimacy there that translates into the paper itself, which in lesser examples often contained visible remnants of those threads. Towards the end of the American Civil War, for example, when the South was in such dire need of paper that its newspapers were being printed on the backs of unsold wallpaper reels, calls for cotton donations contained the poignant suggestion that the letters wives wrote to their soldier husbands might well contain bits of the dresses they donated today, making them impossibly more dear than the words written on them alone could. Wood pulp paper, the product made in paper chase, anonymizes that function entirely, turning paper into the unremarkable, even sterile thing we know and don't think about today. But what Donaldson's theory presupposes, however, is that maybe it doesn't. Though Paper Chase begins with James reading a book in solitude and Ginger playing by herself with a plane, these products nevertheless bring them together. To use a very academic phrase, paper allows their ephemeral emotions to be embodied and tangible. Through James's letter and Ginger's desire to read the same book as her friend, that embodiment entangles and enmeshes them, even across time and space. It's a romantic notion. We, of course, don't make paper from stately and centuries-old English spruce in public parks, at least not anymore, and the idea of consumerism casting such wonderfully wholesome and gossamer threads is probably suspect too. But it's still a wholly lovely notion, and I think I can promise you that your kid will be over the moon for Ginger and James when they find one another again. I feel pretty confident, in fact, that you will too. For its illustrations, we gave Paper Chase a 4.1. This may seem low, given some of the more recent scores and how much I've praised these drawings, but only about 10% of books we've read so far this year have scored in the 4s here, and most of those have been Caldecott winners. It's meant to be a hard range to obtain, and Sandøy's appearance is a triumph. She does a masterful job of crafting small, unforgettable moments, and of interchanging those with impressive, full-bleed spreads that cover both pages. This variation moves the storytelling along sensibly, making the text easy to read aloud, and even adding meaning through its privileging of scenes. The colors range from vibrant to warm, and she's a real pro at capturing emotion evocatively. I think we should expect great things from her. The story scores a 4.3, and one secret goal I have for this podcast is to convince you that children's literature isn't just for children. And while I don't expect you to run to the shelves of your nearest children's library for your next book club meeting, I think Paper Chase would make a fine addendum there. Perhaps during those busy holiday weeks where everyone needs a break and something with fewer pages. My rubric for stories suggests that top scores here capture the imagination of their interlocutors, that's you, as well as their audience, your kid. This book will do that, hands down. No surprise, then, that repeatability scores a 4.5. Addie loves this one and is annoyed that it's been sitting on my desk for a while. We're buying her own copy, and we've already bought copies for her little friends' birthdays. My own score, nearly perfect at 4.8, the highest of any book yet this year. Should Bill Gleason or Meredith Martin ever invite me to guest lecture for their massively popular children's literature course at Princeton, this will be my topic. Addie's score just slightly lower at a 4.2, and I think the only thing holding her back here is the length. As I've mentioned, the publishers suggest this for the 4 to 8 crowd, so it is a bit old for her. But nevertheless, she loves it and requests it often. And so, a final score of 21.9 out of 25, making this, as of this recording, our #1 book of the year. To quote the late Macho Man Randy Savage, "The cream always rises to the top. And this is the creme de la creme, baby. Oh, yeah." I'm sorry about that. Needless to say, though, that you should definitely pull this one up from the stacks and share it with your little, hopefully sooner rather than later. I get the sense that this isn't Donaldson's typical gear, but I certainly hope she continues on in it. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. Get your kids to the library. And keep on reading together.
This has been Toddling the Stacks. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or your podcatcher of choice for new episodes every Monday, and follow us on Insta, Blue Sky, and Facebook for the latest updates. If you like what you hear, leave us a review. Keep up with Adalyn's reading now, find links to buy your favorites, and more at toddlingthestacks.com. Address questions or concerns to pod, that's P-O-D, at toddlingthestacks.com. Graphics for today's show were created by Emily Tatro. Make a website so people can hire you, Emily. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.